I often share recovery and redemption stories to inspire people healing from a porn addiction or porn-induced sexual dysfunction. This is not one of those stories. This is a story about rock bottom. Now, rock bottom is different for each person on their recovery journey, and it really cannot be identified except in retrospect from a place of stability and healing and sobriety. Because rock bottom can always go deeper, things can always get worse, and you have some power over deciding how deep your rock bottom goes. The following story I found in a post on Reddit, and I got the author's permission to share it here to show you just how bad pornography addiction can get and hopefully inspire you to turn things around if you see yourself heading in that downward direction. He says, "I've been debating whether or not to post this, but I think I should, if only to help anyone who might be going down the same road I did. I discovered myself at a very young age. Some of my earliest memories are of touching myself during nap time in kindergarten. I would always go take a nap or control my dreams at least once or twice a day. It wasn't until I started to hit puberty that I learned what I was doing was called masturbating, and that if I looked at naked women, it would feel even better. So I started to steal my dad's Maxim magazines and any movie that said it had nudity in it. Then one day at school, I said to someone I wanted to see characters from cartoons I liked naked. He told me there was porn of that on a thing called the internet. I was only vaguely aware of what the internet was back then. My dad had a computer, but I would only play games on it, like Monsters, Inc. Pinball and Hoyle Casino. But now that I knew you could get porn on it, I knew I had to have my own." This might seem strange to many of you listening, but ask any kindergarten teacher and they will tell you that it's fairly common for young children like this to be discovering themselves, to be touching themselves and feeling that sexual pleasure. It's fairly common for that to happen. For some people, they don't start to have that sexual awakening and that sex drive or start being curious about their bodies in that way and masturbating until puberty. But for others, like this person, it happens much earlier, even as far back as they can remember. And that's why it's so important to be having these conversations about sexuality and relationships and these days pornography and internet pornography with our children as they grow up, consistent conversations. And if you would like to learn more about that topic, you can look back to my recent interview with Kristen Jensen, author of Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, which is a book meant to be read between parents and their children, educating them about the potential dangers of internet pornography. He says, "I begged my parents to give me a computer and a cable to connect with internet. They finally gave me a laptop computer around the time when a new thing called Wi-Fi was introduced. We got the house set up with Wi-Fi and I made my first web search. It was for Pokemon XXX. I fell down the rabbit hole quick. I started looking for all kinds of porn and jerking off to it. It started to become an everyday habit. Come home from school, jerk off to porn, and then move on with my day. Throughout all of this, I was dealing with depression issues. Not necessarily caused by porn. There's a genetic history of depression on my mom's side of the family, but it definitely added fuel to the fire. At around junior high through high school, I started having thoughts of suicide and even made a few attempts. All the while, I went deeper down the rabbit hole. Pornography use isn't usually the cause of mental health issues, but it can certainly exacerbate mental health issues, just like any addiction can. And compulsive and escalatory use, like you describe, using it consistently and escalating into content that you find disturbing or morally inappropriate for what you feel like is right for you, or you're looking at content that shows people treating each other in ways that you would never want to be treated or you would never want to treat others, can cause a lot of feelings of shame and self-loathing and depression, especially in young people. And when we rely on any addictive crutch to deal with emotions like depression or loneliness, it can help in the moment. It can seem to sweep away those feelings when we are so drawn up and absorbed in what we are doing because it's giving us pleasure and it's very compelling. But when we do that consistently, it only deepens the hole that we are in because we're not actually addressing our real needs. We're just pushing them away and running away from them. And then when they come back, they're stronger and more poignant and more painful than they were before. My porn searches started to become more extreme. Hardcore BDSM, torture, vor, guro, S&M, and eventually it just wasn't taboo enough. I needed something illegal. I started looking at child porn. So this is a subject that I've talked about before. I made a video, I think a few years ago now, called Why Would Anyone Watch Child Pornography? And I actually encourage you to pause the video now and go and watch that one, just to get more background on how this happens. But if you don't want to do that or you want to watch that later, just know that not all people who consume child pornography are pedophiles. A true pedophile is someone who has a primary sexual interest, an innate sexual interest in children who are prepubescent. Now, not all people who abuse children sexually are pedophiles. Sometimes it's a victim of opportunity. It's someone that they know they can easily manipulate, and they might not have a primary attraction to children, but because that victim, that person that they're able to make a victim is within their power, they take advantage of that. And not all pedophiles are child abusers. There are pedophiles who have that primary sexual attraction to children, but never act on it because they know that it's wrong and they don't want to hurt anybody. And then there are people who escalate in their use of pornography, always looking for something new, something more extreme, something more taboo, because they are desensitized. And eventually they can escalate into illegal content. Some people get to the point where they can only get aroused by cartoon content or digital content. So they're so divorced from the reality of an intimate sexual experience that just looking at real people doesn't do it for them anymore. They need that stimulation that is so specific to created content like animation or digital rendering. Some people get to the point where they start to doubt their sexual orientation that they've been sure of for their whole lives because they've escalated to content that runs contrary to their orientation that they have always felt that they had. And some people, like Anon in today's post, escalate to illegal content. He says, I never took any pictures myself, but every time CP, child pornography, was posted to 4chan, I would save it before it got deleted. I downloaded a Tor browser and started searching the dark web for CP. Anything to get my fix. What's worse is that I was even active on Reddit at the time and was aware of the NoFap community. I just brushed it off as a bunch of weirdos. Who would ever want to give up porn and masturbation, I thought. You weren't at rock bottom yet. You weren't ready to hear that. Skip ahead to when I was about 21. My computer broke. I took it to get fixed, and then a few days later, when I came home from work, my dad was there waiting for me. He told me to get into the truck, and then told me why. He said the people I took my computer to had found child porn on it. They had reported me to the police, and we were on our way to see a lawyer. He asked me how bad was it. I didn't lie. I just said, it's really bad. It's a nightmare scenario, of course. When you're engaging with pornography daily over years, and you keep on crossing lines in your own mind, you keep on seeking out content that is more and more contrary to what you initially found attractive, you get used to that new stimulation, and that becomes normal for you. You absorb it into your conception of normal, and that can even go into illegal content like child sexual abuse imagery, to the point where you probably worried about getting caught. I would guess so. But the reality of that seems so far away because you had been doing it for quite a long time at this point and never faced consequences. And now reality rears up and slaps you right in the face. I spent the next year under investigation out on a bond. During that time, I had no computer to look at porn on, but I had a 3DS that could. I was scared that if I looked at porn at home, the police would find out. So I started looking at it on public Wi-Fi and jacking off in public bathrooms and at work. I ended up losing my job because of this. We finally went to court and I pled guilty. The judge sentenced me to 10 years of adjudicated probation. That meant that if I could go 10 years without internet porn, the felony wouldn't be on my record. Wow. What a motivation to quit using porn, right? There's no stronger motivation I could imagine. I didn't last a week. Ouch. Even when the stakes are that high, you were not able to control your behavior for longer than a few days. That's addiction, if I've ever seen it. My probation officer asked me if I was struggling with probation. I said yeah. I had slipped up and looked at porn a few times. The next day, I was arrested and taken to jail. I spent a year in jail waiting to be sentenced. My lawyer said they wanted 10 years prison time, but we eventually signed for 6 years. I spent 3 years in prison, and the entire time I spent in there, I thought about how I was going to get porn when I got out. While locked up, I bought pictures of porn stars to jack off to. I started trying to learn how to draw so I could make my own porn. I borrowed Penthouse forum books that circulated around. I was put in a treatment program with other sex offenders. Side note, because I looked at porn instead of looking for a girlfriend, I had never had sex. Still haven't. So I'm a sex offender who has never had sex. And that's when the truth really sunk in. I had an addiction. By the time I was released on parole, I was aware of my addiction and had tools to cope with it, but I wasn't ready to give it up yet. So I kept looking for porn with the intention to slowly wean myself off of it. I bought porn DVDs from an adult store where I live. I bought Eki, I don't actually know how to pronounce this, but Eki manga from bookstores. I ordered Penthouse forum books from a catalog. Then it came time for my annual polygraph test. The previous year, I took a sexual history polygraph, so I passed it. This one was a maintenance polygraph, which meant they would ask me what I had been doing on parole. They asked if I had looked at porn. I lied, said no, and failed the polygraph. I came clean to my PO, and she said it was okay as long as I was trying to quit. I said I was, and that was the truth. I threw away all my porn and continued to attend my SOTP meetings. Let's skip ahead to more recently. One of the conditions of my parole was that I couldn't have a phone with a camera. So I did the impossible and found a shitty flip phone without a camera. I had that thing for 3 years before it just wouldn't recognize the cellular network anymore. I asked my PO if I could just get a cheap smartphone instead. She agreed, but she would check it every month for anything inappropriate. I got my very first smartphone ever and checked if I could access all my old online accounts after 6 years of inactivity. I could only get access to one. My Reddit porn throwaway. I tried to get on my old main account, but it had been so long I couldn't remember the password. I couldn't even access the old email account associated with it because it had been deactivated due to fraudulent activity. So I made a new email and a new Reddit account. I synced the throwaway to my new email and started to use it to look at porn. But on my new main account, the first subreddit I subscribed to was NoFap. The stories there helped me realize it's time to let go. So I deleted the only remnant of my past online life. I wish I could say that I'm going 90 days strong, woo! But I'm not. My longest streak has been 4 days, no porn, and only 3 days, no masturbation. Right now, my goal is just to make it to 5 days without looking. To anyone still reading this, please don't let your addiction get as bad as mine. Seek help. Now. So Anon committed crimes, and these crimes were not victimless. Every time someone views or trades or downloads an image of a child being abused, that child is hurt again. And I believe the justice system was right in punishing you for that. You victimized others in that regard. And yet, I see you as a victim as well. As a child, you were exposed to content that you were not prepared for. You were not old enough to be prepared for, even if you had been educated about the potential dangers. And your sexuality was twisted and perverted into something that you wouldn't probably recognize if you could see years in the future when you were younger. And it caused you to desire and to seek out compulsively illegal content. And it breaks my heart that this happens because it's harmful for everyone involved and it's so unnecessary. So thank you for sharing your story. And if you're out there, you probably haven't gotten as low as Anon has. And I'm not saying that everyone who escalates in their pornography use is going to get to the point where they're using illegal content. That doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen to everybody. But it happens often enough that I do believe that it's feeding a large part of the demand for this illegal content. And even if you don't get that far, like myself, I escalated in my own content use, not to illegal content, but to things that disturbed me, to things that I didn't want to be aroused by. And it harmed me, harmed my relationships. And I know that it happens all the time because I've worked with hundreds of clients who have gone through similar experiences. So if you're on that path, I hope this is the cold splash of water in your face that you need. That's all for today. Have a wonderful porn-free day. I'll see you next time.